All right. Thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Kev, for getting everyone in and organised. I think before we get started today, get on the right slides. There we go. My focus today is connecting with families online. I had planned to do a presentation at the ACCE annual conference about robotics. But I think in the current landscape, it's probably a better focus to be talking about how we can connect with families both during and after the COVID pandemic. So before we get started today, I just thought I'd take everyone through an acknowledgement of country. So as we virtually gather today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and waters throughout Australia on which we are connecting and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I recognise the importance of continued connection to cultures, country and community, to the health and social and emotional wellbeing of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, young people and their families. So a little bit more on what Nath was saying about my professional experience. I'm currently studying a Masters in IB, specialising in the PYP stream. I'm currently teaching grade 1-2 this year, but the previous sort of 8 years of my career have been in early learning. So most recently, as Nathan said, educational leader and 4-year-old kindergarten teacher. But prior to that, in settings like sessional kindergarten, long day care, the Education Institute at the Children's Hospital, creches, school holiday programs, and before and after school care. So I kind of hope that my experience will support the diversity of people we have attending today to tap in to the information from whatever setting they're coming from. So as I said before, I've designed today's session to address sort of all the changes going on in early childhood education at the moment. As we all know, they are rapidly changing times with, it feels like, new announcements every day or every week. So I'm sure you've all heard Victorian schools are transitioning back to on-site learning over the next month. And although that doesn't dictate what early learning centres do, because the expectation is that students have been on site or children have been on site in early learning, it will certainly start to impact attendance. And I would assume that you're going to have a higher proportion of your families attending. So today we're going to go through a bit of a cycle of reflection and then get into some technologies that you might like to be implementing in your programs. But it's sort of with an awareness that some people are operating almost full programs, some people have got reduced numbers, and some people, there's like a small number of centres that are actually closed at the moment and offering fully online learning. So yeah, just tap into what information is relevant to you and kind of pick and choose what's going to suit your centre. Many of you will be familiar with this visual from the Victorian Early Years Learning and Development Framework, and I just wanted to put this up today to really orientate us into a child-centred focus. We all know that everything going on in the world impacts children in such a profound way, but I think coming back to this visual, it really does show us that the things going on in the broader world, economic, political, social and environmental, are still impacting on the child, whether or not it's just because they've been removed from the centre at the moment or they're not having social connections. They're impacted in a number of ways. So we're going to kind of focus on that today. So my key messages, nothing is going to be the same at the moment, especially social development for our early learners, which is so integral at this age, but that doesn't mean we just give up and think that we can't achieve things during this period. Each cohort of children and families will be different, and it's going to be a really big focus of today. We cannot roll out one successful program, whether it's online or remote, but we can use shared tools and shared understandings to find success for our centres and our children. We really want to support families at home, not overwhelm them with new demands. So we want to share ways that families can engage in learning opportunities. We don't have a strict academic focus like some more of the primary or secondary programs that are doing formal home learning at the moment. You may be offering ideas and inspiration to parents, but it's in no way a pressure to complete tasks and meet attendance requirements at the moment. And the priority in our sector is mental wellbeing and connectedness, and that's both for families and for educators. I think at the moment everyone's feeling really overloaded. If you're in any kind of networking groups with early childhood teachers, you're seeing a lot of stress and burnout at the moment. So we really need to focus on how we can integrate things that support our workload, but also supporting our families as well. It's not a time to kind of drop the ball, but it's certainly a time to make decisions that support everyone. So just briefly, I know we've got people from out of Victoria today, but what's happening in Victoria, the learning from home expectations in early childhood are that where possible, children should be attending. And if they're not attending, then it's a requirement to make a reasonable effort to engage with families. So there's not a strict requirement of how often you need to talk to them, what you need to set, what you need to do. That's about contextualizing it to your service and finding what suits you and your families. But do be aware it is currently an expectation in Victoria. So that'll feed through our presentation today. So before we even actually talk about any technology, we're going to go through a bit of a program reflection together. And it's going to support us in our program, support our families, our community, and it's going to sort of underpin what resources we're actually going to select that might be useful for us. So this visual here is from the new Early Years Planning Cycle resource, for the Victorian Early Years Learning and Development Framework. And if you haven't downloaded it or seen it yet, I really would highly recommend you to. It's got lots of really amazing examples of practice and ways that you can extend children and engage in the planning cycle. So we're sort of just looking today at the context that underpins our planning cycle. So before we can make decisions about what technologies we might use or how we can support families from home, we need to understand our context because, as we know, they're all different. So engage with me together in this little reflection. You can do it just on a pen and paper, or you can type some things in the chat. I'll do my best to monitor, and I know we've got some DLTV people having a look in the chat for me as well, because this could be quite different for each context, or we might find some really similar threads. So what is important for your cohort of children that perhaps they could be doing at home? And this isn't necessarily well, COVID's going on. This could be before, after. There's a lot of validity in thinking, what can your children achieve while they're at home? So have a bit of a think. It could be goals that you identified in term one, like perhaps motor skill development, resilience, collaboration. So feel free to put some ideas down in the chat if you've got any. Perhaps even what your families have been doing over the holidays, what they've been sharing with you, what themes are your children interested in. And I'll give you some of my suggestions that I think have been coming through in conversations I've been having. So I'll give everyone a little minute and then we might have a chat. Fantastic. So we've got a few ideas in there already. So staying connected, especially for those who are accessing a remote program. So that might be connections between educators and children. That might be connections between children and other children, or it might even be between educators and families. So supporting the adult networks that are around the children enrolled in your service. Reading and being read to, definitely very important. With our early learners. And that's one that, depending on your group of families, they might not be literate in English, or they might be able to speak English but not read English. So that's certainly a consideration you can think about when we're looking at some of the resources today. And maintaining a connection with the school and class community, definitely. Whether the children are attending or not, it's such a priority right now for everyone's mental health to keep people connected yeah, in that sense of community. So that'll come up a bit later, considering how we can think about that. So I've got some other things that I think have been coming up with early childhood educators. So socialisation, that's one that's tricky to do at home, but if that's a priority for some of your students, we can look at some technologies that might support that a little bit later. Learning through play, so that might be some advocacy to your parents about the value of play. Maybe the big siblings are doing, tracing letters and numbers, and you can show the value of the play-based learning that they could be doing at home. Relationships, community, manipulatives like blocks, routine. For some of our early learners, the routine that we've implemented in term 1 or in the start of the year has seen them feel really supported and safe in our environment. So thinking about ways that even if students are at home and they're mainly spending most of their time at home, you could still support families to implement a routine for them that might give them that sense of safety and security in their home environment. Problem solving, reasoning, persistence, always love at the start of the year with 3-year-olds, building those up. So think about, for some of those students, they might be losing a whole term of those experiences with you. So some of the things you could support parents to do at home that might scaffold those interactions. Pre-literacy skills, like we said about the reading, fine and gross motor skills, and some maths like patterns or time, measurement activities through cooking. So there's a lot of stuff that you might identify as important for your specific group of kids, or for a couple of students that you work with. They might be really very important things for you. So again, feel free to pop something in the chat. This is something that I think is going to be vastly different depending on your setting. What resources will your families have? So I've worked in settings where all of the enrolments are from the local commission flats with refugee families who the children share beds and don't have books at home, to one of the top private schools in the state where families had access to whatever they could imagine. So how I would support these families at home would be incredibly different. So I think this is a really big one to think about. What are families actually going to have at home? If you're thinking about implementing some technologies, what can you implement with what they have at home? I'll give you a few minutes. I can see some ideas coming through. Great. Lee's said they're making up some packs containing resources. And I think this is something that's coming through really strongly for families that are choosing to learn from home, is that they don't have the same, specifically, it seems, a lot of art and craft activities. I used to always have parents tell me, no, we don't do painting at home. That's why we send them to kinder, because it's too messy. So thinking about things that you could send home that would support the children to continue to engage in activities that you thought were desirable for their development. I think making packs is such a great idea. I know some of my colleagues' children have got packs sent home that are things like pipe cleaners and beads for threading or for making craft. So I think that's a really, really thoughtful consideration. And Miranda said intermittent access to devices, books, and varied time to spend with their kids. So yeah, it might not always be consistent access that they have things. And especially for children with older siblings, they might be using the devices for their school learning, which for some families, the priority might be school over kinder or early learning. And I'm sure lots of you find that. So I'll jump to my next slide. I've got some more examples. So things that they might have at home or might lack at home: books, Lego, building blocks, puzzles, Uno cards, or just a normal deck of cards, dice, like Lee said, the craft supplies. So if that's something you know that they're lacking, that's definitely a way that you could support them. Ingredients for sensory play, measuring cups and spoons for cooking, technology and devices, or a printer. So I know whether or not you're sending anything home, my school had originally assumed all families would have access to a printer, but I think in reality, it's a bit more like 50% of families have a printer. So kind of collecting that data is really important before you're creating a program that might not suit them. So something we'll talk about a little bit later is how can you get this information from families. If you're making assumptions of what they do and don't have, you might miss out on something. So perhaps a Google form to families, or on that phone call that you're making to families, asking them specific questions that are leading to ways you can support them. Kelly's just jumped in with outdoor environment. That is such a good one. I hadn't thought of that. Depending on where your families are, I work with families that live anywhere from apartments to some of my families last year had like multiple acre properties on farmland. So the disparity is quite large, whether they've just got a little balcony. I've actually got a student at the moment who's in isolation after getting an emergency flight back from overseas. So yeah, they're in lots of different environments, and thinking how you can support them. So again, each group's going to be different. So thinking about what suits your cohort, definitely outdoor environment's quite a big one. And this one ties in quite well, but time commitment. So what kind of time commitment do your families have? I work with some families that have one child, and at the moment that's their full focus, and they're just supporting their education at home with my support and guidance. But I also work with other families that have maybe 4 children, varying from a toddler or a baby right up to high school age. And so for the youngest learners, I think sometimes they sort of get just pulled along or left behind when things are really busy. So have a bit of a think about what situations your families are in. Are they managing crisis meetings in video conferences? Are they an essential service worker who's still leaving the house to work? How many children are at home? So I'll give you a second to think about that, and then I've got another little prompt for you. Feel free to throw it in the chat if you like. Talk about what kind of time your families might have. So my big thought on time commitment for families is really about offering them support, like we talked about at the start, or offering them opportunities to engage in activities, but not having a time limit or a time frame or an expiry on things. I think the desirable thing for a teacher is that, or an educator is that, okay, great, I'll set this for all the kids. They can have a go at it today, and then I'll give them feedback on it tomorrow, or I'll share their videos tomorrow. But there's just a lot going on at home to consider that you might not be aware of. So I think, yeah, sometimes teachers might make decisions or make judgments without thinking, how is this actually going to play out for a family at home? So I think it's really important to reflect on time commitment. And how can we support mental health and well-being for our families? I'd actually love if you had any ideas on this one. I think it's just an area that needs to be consistently mentioned, talked about. I think it needs to be factored into every decision we're making. I'm so conscious of not, incidentally shaming any of my families for things that they're dealing with, or pressuring them to feel like they should be engaging in a certain way if that doesn't suit them, but also making them feel like I'm there for them and offering them opportunities. So if anyone has any specifics, feel free to share, and keep thinking how it's relating to you and your cohort or your groups of children. And definitely, I think, sometimes the kinder kids can be the last priority, because there's a bigger pressure coming from schools to submit work and on attendance requirements, whereas in early learning, it's seen as a little bit more flexible. And as long as we're supporting them, that's kind of the tick for that. I love what Lee said. They're doing Zoom chat so the children can see each other and keep in touch. And I think that's one of the biggest ones. The first week of our program that we were putting online, I did a recording of my voice, and I got so many emails from parents just saying, loved hearing your voice. And it wasn't even a video with my face or, you know, me doing anything particularly engaging. It was basically a 1-minute recording welcoming them to our online learning program. And I think that connection really supported the concept that we needed to keep the verbal and the visual stuff available for kids to see each other, but also, yeah, for their teachers and educators. Yeah, Lynn, I definitely agree. Remaining flexible and approachable. Like, so yeah, being there for families to approach you and come and ask you or, yeah, request things. And yeah, flexible. It feels like every day we're being told something different's changing or we're going back to a different style. Yeah, definitely Zoom chats seems to be coming through. Yeah, and encouraging communication. I think you're right there, Kay. Getting families talking, whether it's to you or to each other, is such an amazing mental health support for families and for kids. I think sometimes in early learning, we forget the massive impact we have on families. Like, I know a lot of my families from 3-year-old classes in the past are still best friends. Like, it creates such an amazing support network as their children grow up. And I think we see that all across childcare, early learning, kindergarten. So that's great. And my other little note there is that for educators as well, but for families, it's a hard time for everyone. So as much as we have so much knowledge to share with families, it might not be a priority for families right now. So academic learning or even engaging in online programs in any capacity might not be what a family can manage right now. So offering suggestions for what might suit our families, but also just literally that friendly support that we're there to offer every day, like we do always at pick up and drop off time. There we go. So now we've gone through a little bit of a cycle altogether, having a look at our program, contextualizing. I think it's time to jump into the purpose of technology. So you can use technologies with children, with parents, with families, with educators. But I think it's really important, especially in early learning, to look at the purpose. I think we're the area open to the biggest critique about use of technology, whether it's with our students, with our children when they're in our service, or whether it's with families and privacy and all of those kind of things with the youngest children, I think is always up for the hottest debate. So I always, yeah, think it's very important to understand your purpose so you can relay it to families and committees of management, your providers, whoever's involved, so you can really back yourself on what you think is the right thing. So like we talked about a little bit before on our what resources the families will have or what's important for our cohort of children, a big thing that came up for the group here today was connecting with families and building a sense of community. So it looks like that might be the purpose that a lot of us are going to be focusing on for the rest of this term and perhaps ongoing. We really don't know where this pandemic is going to take the educational landscape. So considering ourselves open to things to keep changing, and maybe families aren't comfortable attending yet, those kind of things. So connecting with families, building a sense of community, and also the discussion of sharing content. So if you're looking to share some kind of learning program, or the content might be you know, reading books, doing something like that. These are often our purposes. They may be shared, you may just have one, you may have something a little bit different, but I think it's good to start the discussion there. So some of the different ways we can meet the purpose of these 3 areas. Connecting with families, I'm going to talk a little bit about video conferencing, phone calls, emails, messaging, sharing photos. And those are sort of things you've all alluded to already that you might be interested in doing. The building a sense of community, I think it's really about shared posts to multiple families. and building and facilitating a space for shared conversation. So whether that's through an app or whether that's in an online space somewhere, it's sort of in your role to be facilitating the engagement and discussion. Or if it's sharing content, so perhaps making learning visible of children that are attending, or it might be sharing learning opportunities for children to engage in at home. So we'll talk a little bit about apps where you can share photos, videos, and information. And I think with the people we've got attending today, you may already have awareness of some of these, but I know we've got a diversity of people. So we'll sort of jump into all of the different suggestions. I feel like maybe this is the slide lots of you came for. So we're going to delve deeper into all of these. But these are platforms being used by early learning centres, early childhood environments at the moment that I know of that are being successful. So that could be anywhere from the creches, OSHAs, sessional kinders, long day cares. There's different alignments, which we'll talk about as we go through them. So some of the classics like emails, newsletters, and websites are still really good. It doesn't matter, you know, that we're in a pandemic. If that's the way that families are already accessing information, that's going to be such a strong way to continue the information sharing with families. The learning story apps, Seesaw, Educate, and Story Park. So I know a lot of our educators working in long day care may be in centres that are aligned with Educate or Story Park. So if you're at something like a Good Start Centre or a centre that owns a number of childcare centres, you may not have much of a choice. You may already have one pre-decided for you. Personally, I am a big user of Seesaw, and I've had such amazing engagement and response from families and children alike. So I'll probably be talking a bit more about Seesaw today. But if other people want to compare and contrast their experiences with Educate and Story Park, please feel free to put it in the chat. Education suites. So this one is more for early learning centres attached to either schools, whether it's state schools like in Canberra or in Tassie, or perhaps independent school settings where you already have an alignment. So at previous independent schools I've been at, across the whole school, they may have used Google Drive. So that's something families might be familiar with, or perhaps just your team planning. You use Microsoft Teams or Google Drive. So that's something that you're already using to facilitate, kind of keep content in one place. Video chat or live video. If you came in early to our chat, you will have seen we were actually just talking about this. I feel like we're all experts now in so many different settings. So we're on a Google Meet today, but tomorrow with my class, I have a WebEx chat, and then with my friends on the weekend, I'm having a Zoom chat. So I think you just need to pick which one suits your service. Again, you might already have an alignment with them. If you are a department school, like prep to year 12, you may be endorsing WebEx at the moment, but I know a lot of independent schools are endorsing Zoom. So just looking at if you have an alignment, how can you use that already? But if not, have a look at some of the positives that we talk about today and what might suit you. And then in terms of pre-recording video, so not live, Dropbox for uploading and sending things to families, YouTube for uploading and sending things to families, and that might just be an unlisted video. So not anyone can just Google like Libby story read aloud and watch me reading a book, but my students will be able to access it. And screencasting. So we'll go through these. I've got some examples to show you. And closed Facebook groups. I'll just mention this one because I know some centres already use it. So today I really want to talk about if it's something you're already using, it's the right time to continue using it, because as we've said, like, it's a stressful time for families and for educators. And introducing any new platforms may suit some families and not others, may suit some educators and not others. So it's really not a time to introduce something new now, but it's something to consider moving forward. So if you see something you like today, how could you implement implemented in term 3 or term 4, or for your incoming children next year. So depending on your provider or your committee of management or your board, they're ultimately going to dictate what programs you do and don't use. So if there's something that you really like, you can start to find the backing in it today, and then perhaps advocate for that to be used in the future. So consider what will suit you in your context. It's ultimately up to each learning environment to make the decision about what works for them. So sorry, I will go back to closed Facebook groups. It's really not one I would recommend, but under the thought that people may already be using it, lots of early learning centres do self-report using closed Facebook groups. I'd just be a little bit concerned about educator and family privacy, professionalism, confidentiality, those kind of things. But if it's something you're already using, certainly full steam ahead. That might be the platform that you're going to continue using. I've got some more slides to take you into specifics of things, and we'll loop back to see if I've forgotten anything. So classic, total kinder classic is having an email, whether it's paper or hard copy. Having a newsletter, that goes out to families, whether it's on a website or printed out. Are you emailing them out to families? This is one I used to write a few years ago. And I think the focus of it really was advocating for what we were doing, but also sharing things with families. So when we reflect on what we might be doing when children are learning from home, it's really the same thing we've already been doing. We share with families constantly. And if you're used to doing that in a newsletter, you can keep doing it that way. If that's working for your families, you might just move to an online space. You might email it out if it's a hard copy still. And yeah, it could be through your website. So there's lots of different sort of considerations there. So Seesaw, this is my big one that I think really did transform my practice when I started using it. So for me, Seesaw was such an amazing way to communicate with families about what we were doing and really educate them about the benefits of different learning experiences. So this one here links into my ACCE presentation about robotics and iPads and stuff. But what we've done here with the students is learn how to use a QR code. So we'd been scanning QR codes and watching videos that I'd chosen and created QR codes for to share with the children. But I know that when you introduce technology, you get a lot of anxiety from parents. So in a way to combat that, one of the posts I made that day or that week was about very clearly explaining to parents how we were implementing it, and that it was a really supported and positive and adult-orientated invitation. So our children here loved doing it, became independent by the end of the year, were very capable of scanning QR codes and engaging independently with the iPads. But for our families, I knew that if they just went home saying, oh, well, today we used the iPads, we'd build a lot of anxiety. So as you can see, there's parents that have liked the post down here. Parents can comment and ask questions. I've put up, I think, 2 photos for this post, but you can put up to like 10 photos, videos. So this is a way that my families were already engaged in an online space. And so I know the teacher with this group at the moment, what she's doing is sending out learning experiences through Seesaw to the kids learning from home. So parents don't need to learn a new app. They don't need to get a new login. It's just a one-click and they're there approach. Because if you're already worried about families not engaging, adding an extra login or some kind of extra step is just like too hard basket. So instead of content with children and myself, what's being posted are things like videos of the educators cooking recipes or the educators reading stories, videos of experiments they could try at home, or examples of outdoor play they could be doing, So there's lots of different things you can do on this platform, and you can send them one-on-one to families. So it might be just to one child you're sending a specific thing. Perhaps if routine is their focus, there might be something about routine. Or you can be sending it to the whole group and really tapping into that purpose of building a sense of community. So I'm happy to answer questions about Seesaw if people have them, but I will keep going. I find it so functional. It's easy to use. Families really quite like doing it. And I'm just going to quickly have a look in the chat. Yeah, phone calls, definitely getting outside and fresh air. Yes, and definitely hard for educators too. I think it's easy to gloss over that. Flexibuzz or Compass. My school definitely uses Compass, but we haven't been sending out content through Compass. So it would be interesting to hear what that's been like for settings. We'll keep going through. Oh, actually, I'll tell you one more thing about Seesaw before we move on. You can really enhance the functionality of things you're already using. So a colleague of mine has been uploading a Google Slides to Seesaw. So the families already use Seesaw. So they just click on the Google Slides and it sends them to some interactive videos and links to things rather than it all just being housed in Seesaw, but they're not required to log in and do an extra step. The educators kind of take care of that and upload it. A colleague of mine is also using Seesaw to do show and shares or show and shares or show and tells. So getting the students who aren't at kinder to talk about a topic, whether it's chosen by the adults or whether the children just show you something at home or a toy they've been enjoying or an activity they did, it's sent in to the educator and the educator posts it for everyone to watch with, of course, everyone's permission. And then children are able to respond back. So you might post a video of the child sharing something about their home and other children can ask questions like they would at kinder. Like, oh, I loved seeing your swing outside. Can you swing yourself on it or does someone else push you? And it kind of creates that sense of community in that way. So I think Seesaw gives you that functionality where you can one-on-one communicate with families either via private messaging or sending them photos and videos, or you can do it to a group or to the whole group. So I think that's a really positive thing that you can do with that. So here's an example of the Google Slides. So this is something that would go out on Seesaw. And for this centre, what they were focusing on was a literacy, a numeracy, a science, a fine motor skills, music, gross motor and social learning. And, you know, going through their program reflection, those were priorities for their families. And so that's the content that was going out each week with a theme, because that's sort of what suited the families and the educators, and giving an example of activities. So some of the things that could be going out to families, obviously time permitting for educators in terms of workload. A numeracy focus could be making number rockets. So simple things that families could need, which could be things you've delivered to them or could be things you know they might have, and just a counting activity. So embedded in this slide for the families was a video of the educator making the number rockets. So it's like you modelling to a small group of children how they could complete a craft activity, or, you know, even modelling to the whole group if that's where your learners are at. And that sort of keeps some normalcy for the children in terms of seeing a regular educator of theirs and doing an activity that they would do at kinder. So it's a kinder activity, but with the supported video, it's certainly accessible at home for these children that are choosing to learn from home. Another one here is Jungle PlayDoh. So I'm such a big advocate for sensory play, as most of us are. So I always love advocating to parents about using Play-Doh at home. I'm like, kids love it so much. It will keep them busy. Just don't do it anywhere near carpet and you'll keep everyone happy. So down the bottom of this, you can see in the same way it's got, sorry, let my little slide thing disappear. Listen to Miss Melissa reading the instructions for this activity. So most of your children will not be able to read this yet. So whether your educators are comfortable filming themselves or not, that's a discussion that needs to be had. But recording your voice, most people are comfortable with that. So this is something that's really, the kids will absolutely love this. Like, even if it's just listening to your voice, and they'd be running around the house going, Miss Melissa said this, Miss Melissa said this, and be really keen to engage in that activity. I personally think this one is really great because it's a small time investment for parents. And then what you can do is send the kids off, and that can be an activity that's, you know, a little bit of a busy activity for parents. And I think once they've made the Play-Doh, it kind of keeps the kids busy, whether it's for a few days or a few weeks, some time period most days. I think tapping into things like that is going to be really fantastic for supporting those families at home that are maybe looking for a little bit of respite. I'll talk briefly about screencasting. It's not as prevalent with our early learners, but this is targeted at one of my 7-year-old students who is a pre-reader. And so what I've done is screencast how they can complete the activity that I've set them on Google Classroom. So I'll just show you a little snippet to give you an idea of how you can record your screen. Could be a guided drawing class that you're doing. So you could screencast for a number of different reasons. Oh, let's try once more.
Good morning, it's Miss Gronn here. Today we're going to try something a little bit different for our reading activity. So I'm going to take you through a video to show you how it works. When we log into the 12G Google Classroom, what you're going to see on Friday morning is this. It says reading word practice. So if you're watching my video, that means you've already opened this using some Google Slides to show Miss Gronn what you know about letter sounds and letter shapes. So I'm going to open one that I have ready. So you're.
So I won't take you through the whole video, but obviously a very academic focus. This is a student who's enrolled in grade 1. But it's something that you could do. You could be screencasting a guided drawing on your computer, or screencasting yourself creating something, or perhaps if your educators aren't comfortable, or yourself not comfortable recording your face, it's a really good way to record your voice. You could do a guided story. You could do something really calm with a nice backdrop. So it's a nice way to have a video and have your voice, whether it's educational, sort of academic focused or not. Another big one, which I'm sure lots of you are doing, but I'll show you a little snippet anyway. This one's me recording myself without my face because of some privacy when we first started using online learning at my school. And this is, I think, one that I got such a good response from. It's a favourite book of the kids, and they were really excited for me to read it to them. So I'll play you a quick snippet and so you can see what it's like. Oh. There we go.
Marcel and the Sun. Marcel and the Sun, written and illustrated by J. Daniel Wright. Marcel loved the sun. He loved the way it shimmered in the mornings, how it smelt on wet grass, and the way it turned the grass yellow at dusk.
I think this is one of the most effective things to do. If you've got children learning from home, you can record yourself reading books. At the moment, there's no copyright implications during COVID, unless someone wants to correct me, but libraries and schools have been given the permission to upload things for educational purposes during the pandemic. And when that changes, there may be a request to pull them all down. But it's just such a good way to get kids and families involved in reading. And it also gives parents a little break from reading a story. So I'm going to zoom through a few more things. Sorry, catch myself. There we go. So there's a little bit of a difference between content selection and content creation. So I think content selection of things that are already available online gives you a little bit more management in your workload, especially for those who are still dealing with lots and lots of children at their service, but are trying to meet that, you know, department requirement, or just trying to really support their families at home. You don't have to make everything. You don't have to be a million people. It's about really finding the great resources that you can send to families, and, you know, trust that they're going to be quality resources. This is one that I tell anyone wherever I go, and it's not a sponsored post, but Cosmic Kids Yoga is one of the best things online for kids. It is amazing. The person in Cosmic Kids Yoga, I've actually forgotten her name, but she takes kids through guided yoga and guided meditation. They do mindfulness. It's just an amazing channel. Some of the yoga videos are things like Star Wars, Frozen, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. There's just so many different topics that are going to suit different learners. So I have kids anywhere from 2 years old right up to kids up in year 6 that will engage with this. And it's all free as far as I'm aware. I haven't come up against anything. And I know that it's sort of safe to send to my families and know that the kids can watch it. For the most part, of course, it is still on YouTube. Yeah, I've got someone's agreed with me in the chat there. It is amazing. So if you haven't used it, use it, especially talking about mental health and well-being with our families. This might give families 30 minutes of respite, and it might get the kids to really tune into how they're feeling. She's amazing. So that's a really good one in terms of content selection about things that already exist online. But some other things, the Department of Education, the early childhood sector, has just updated the Fuse packages. So the Fuse packages online, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Fuse packages early childhood. And they've just updated them to link really closely with the Victorian Early Years Learning and Development Framework to support us at the moment with families that might be learning from home. I haven't actually perused them this week, but I hear that they're quite supportive. So that's something, again, that's sort of, you know, it's in a safe platform. It's supported by the department to get those things out to families. So if you think they might suit your families and they align with some goals for your students, that's going to be perfect for you. Other things that I've sort of sourced online to just a quick send home to families are sensory play recipes, like we saw with that PlayDoh recipe. STEM challenge cards. Like if you know your kids have Lego, you can just Google like STEM challenge Lego and you'll come up with a million different things for free. And I think that's such a good one. Again, it's obviously educational and supportive, but it's also a bit of busy work. So, you know, kids might have been using Lego or blocks forever and ever in their house, but if you're introducing a new way to use them, that's going to support parents to maybe, you know, cook dinner or deal with some of the older siblings while the kids are engaging in something that you know is beneficial. But also, yeah, really keeping them busy so parents can, you know, survive what's going on at home. And just simple recipes. So things they could cook as a family for dinner, or things they could do with an older sibling. Some kind of things like that that you can just Google. You don't have to create all the content in the world. Let me just double check full circle that I've covered everything. So yeah, the other thing I just wanted to say about videos, I feel like the most impactful thing you can do, whether you've sort of got permission to do them live from your provider on Zoom, Skype, WebEx, Google Meet, or not, is engage with your families in a visual way and an auditory way. So if you can read books, if you can sing them songs, if you can tell them stories, if you can chat about your weekend or what your pet did yesterday on your walk, I think that's just going to be something that they're going to love. And I'm sure lots of you are doing that. But different ways you can sort of engage with families is uploading them on Dropbox and emailing them out, popping them up on YouTube. In your privacy settings, it can be an unlisted video. So like I said before, not everyone can search it and watch your lovely read aloud video or your singing video. I would just be mortified if like everyone was watching me sing with 4-year-olds. But I know that the 4-year-olds just love it, so it's worth it. Other things you could create yourself or as a team, yeah, singing familiar songs, cooking a recipe, puppet shows, science experiments, gardening, art and craft, things. You just got to tap into the things you'd normally be doing. Puppetry, that's great, Lynn. I love hearing that. I've got so many mini puppet theatres that do not get used as much as they should, but I think that's a really engaging thing, and not all parents are keen to do puppets. Like, I think that's something that's probably done less at home. I think a lot of our families are keen to read books. Some will sing songs, and then puppets is like the next step that maybe they're not ready to take. So I think that's a really great one. And in terms of privacy, you know, you might not need your face in that. That's something that people might be more happy to do. You could also do counting opportunities with cards and dice, different sort of read aloud things, questioning when you're reading a book. What's this part of the book, the front cover, the author, all that stuff you'd normally do at group time. You can still sort of offer that to families through home learning. Something that a colleague mentioned to me was about the consideration of live streaming a group time or recording a group time to send home. So if you've got half of your children attending, you could consider with your provider how you could perhaps Zoom that home for families to log in from home and watch a group time of reading books, singing songs, etc. Or you could record it and send it home. So the consideration there is the confidentiality and privacy, which I'll jump to. So, of course, you need to consider all of the children that will be present at your service that could be recorded in some way, and the children that might be at home logging in. And there's not sort of any platforms that the department have already endorsed for early childhood services. So it's up to each provider to ensure that you're meeting confidentiality and privacy in your selection of online applications. So for most of you, that will look like on your enrolment forms, there'll be something about privacy, confidentiality, but I would assume that with the updates that we're all sort of doing every day with relation to COVID, that we might be changing some of the ways we use technology. So that might need to be a new form for parents to sign and consent to, or it might be just a little bit of an alteration to your enrolment form, you know, going forward. Happy to answer any questions about that, but basically it really is up to you guys to make sure you're doing the right thing. So I think that's where things like this give you suggestions where other places have been successful, and you can kind of base your ideas off that. So that is pretty much it from me. I love this photo because it's showing children being collaborative on technology. I think parents always view children on technology as isolated and not engaging with others, and they're just stuck on their screen all day. But in reality, when I introduce tech with 3 to 5 year olds, the first thing they want to do is help each other. So yeah, love this photo. But please, if you have any questions, I somehow have timed it that we've got just a few minutes to go. So yes, let me know. I'm going to read through the comments quickly. Yeah, I'm going to agree with what Deb said there, talking about the importance of getting outside if possible each day. A relaxed chance to walk and talk can do wonders. I've been setting some of my students, we're doing a live WebEx with my students twice a week at the moment, and I sort of give them an activity to do to maybe show me their work, or we'll play a little game or something. So I've been trying to make all of the activities in preparation for our WebEx for the students to be like going outside. So like collect some leaves, or go and do a drawing of the weather, and then you can show me, just to support families to send the kids outside or to take them outside, because I think it is so important to do that. All right, well, that's me done, unless we've got some questions. Oh, Lynn, that's great. Setting some obstacle course challenges. cubby house making, which has been a big hit. One of my colleagues, she works with some of the students with additional needs, and so some of the content she's been creating for students at home has been fine motor activities. So one of the things she did was stacking sticks on top of each other outside and making them balance. So that was a priority for those students. Yeah, setting outdoor things. I love that. All right. Well, I think I'll let you go then. Does Nath, do you want to say anything to finish up if we haven't got questions?
Yeah, thanks again, Libby. That was terrific, and it's great to see people offering their questions as well and ideas. So no, really great overall. Thank you. We will hang around on the chat for another 5-10 minutes, so please do feel free to stick around and ask any other questions that you might have. But otherwise, we want to thank you for coming on board. Thanks, Deb, again for your input too. And yeah, have a really good afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I've also just realised I put in this extra slides of apps that I had been using with the kids in the last few years. So if you want to have a look at some of the things that I was doing with 3 to 5 year olds, feel free to have a look at this slide. Welcome to Country app, QR code reader, the Victorian Aboriginal Corporation for Language books are amazing. Pattern shapes, geoboard, there's a few good things there if you're looking for apps. My pleasure. Thank you all for coming.